In the history of mankind, few names stand as tall as legend, and Alexander the Great is one of them. A young Macedonian who never reached the age of 32, yet in just 13 years, he reshaped the face of the world. His story was born with a prophecy and a blazing star in the sky, as if the gods themselves had announced the birth of an extraordinary conqueror. Raised under the guidance of the philosopher Aristotle, he combined the sword of a warrior with the mind of a sage. From an early age, he proved to be different. His courage and intelligence made kings see in him more than a mere heir to the throne. After the assassination of his father, he ascended the throne to face rebellions and hostility, turning fear into legend. He led his armies across Asia and the East, toppling the Persian Empire and founding eternal cities such as Alexandria. In every battle, he embodied both ruthlessness and honor, ambition and mercy. He died young in Babylon, leaving behind an unsolved mystery about his sudden end. Yet his legacy remained immortal, for Alexander was not merely a king, but a storm that changed the course of history.
On a tranquil night in Macedonia, 356 BC, the heavens seemed unlike themselves. The stars gathered in strange constellations, as if convened to witness a moment of destiny. Suddenly, silence was torn apart by a fiery streak. A blazing meteor split the clouds and hurtled toward the earth, illuminating the night before it fell near the palace of King Philip II. The people trembled in awe, but the priests read it as a divine omen. The gods had sent their sign. That night, they declared, a child would be born. A child not like others, but one destined to shake the thrones of kings and alter the course of history. And indeed, on that very night, in the royal chambers, Queen Olympias gave birth to her son, Alexander. His first cry was not merely the sound of a newborn's breath, but, to some, the proclamation of a hero whose name would be etched by time in letters of fire and light. From the moment she held him, Olympias believed her son was no ordinary child. She whispered that he was the fruit of divine union, born of royal blood and heavenly power. She told of visions and dreams before his birth, a secret serpent coiling around her, a celestial radiance engulfing her body, as though fate itself had chosen her to bear the one who would rule the world. Cradling him, she would bring her lips close to his ear and whisper, with almost prophetic certainty,
"You were not born to live as other men, but to master the world, to bend nations and peoples to your will."
From that night on, the Macedonian court whispered that Olympias's son was marked by destiny, and that the meteor blazing across the heavens had been nothing less than the announcement of an emperor's birth. The prophecy had been written, and fate had begun to turn its pages. Alexander grew within the walls of Macedonia's court, where the clash of swords and the pounding of hooves echoed daily. His father, King Philip II, was a stern man of unyielding ambition, restless in his drive to unite the Greek cities beneath his banner, forging Macedonia into a power feared across the land. His mother, Olympias, instilled in him a deeper conviction that he was not as other mortals, that the blood of kings and gods coursed through his veins, and that his destiny was to stand atop the world. Yet, the greatest influence on the boy was not the sword nor the throne, but the mind. For Philip chose the greatest teacher of the age for his son, Aristotle. Beneath the shade of olive trees, the young Alexander listened to lessons of philosophy, ethics, politics, and science. Aristotle taught him that the earth was not merely a battlefield, but a vast stage for wisdom and knowledge. A true leader, he said, must be not only a fearless warrior, but a thinker who understands the nature of men and the world. Alexander became enchanted with Homer's Iliad. He kept a copy beneath his pillow as if it were a sacred scripture, guiding his life. From its heroes, he learned courage and glory, that greatness is written in fire and blood. From Aristotle, he learned that knowledge was a weapon sharper than steel, for it directs the sword and commands the armies. Even as a boy, he astonished those around him with a bravery beyond his years. One day, his father presented him with a wild horse named Bucephalus. None of the warriors could tame it. One after another they failed, and the beast seemed untamable. But Alexander, with keen eyes and an uncanny insight, noticed the animal trembled at the sight of its own shadow. Calmly, he approached, turned the horse toward the sun so the shadow vanished, and with steady hands took hold of the reins. The stallion quieted, and Alexander leapt upon its back, riding forth with fearless command as if born to mastery. The onlookers gasped, and King Philip himself, with pride and wonder on his face, uttered the words that would echo through history.
My son, seek out a kingdom worthy of you, for Macedonia is far too small.
Those words were themselves a prophecy, affirming that this youth was not destined for an ordinary life. He would go forth to claim realms vast enough to match his boundless ambition.
In 336 BC, Macedonia was shaken to its core. In a moment shrouded in mystery and intrigue, King Philip II was struck down, the man who had spent his life forging an army and uniting the Greek cities beneath his banner. None knew with certainty who orchestrated the plot. Was it ambitious rivals within, or foreign hands that saw Philip as a threat too great to ignore? What was certain, however, was that the kingdom suddenly found itself facing a vacant throne. In that perilous hour, a youth not yet 20 was called to the front to claim the crown, Alexander. There was no time for hesitation, no room for doubt. Every gaze fixed upon him. Some saw in him weakness, a boy unfit for kingship. Others believed his flame would soon be extinguished in the storm. But from the very first moment, Alexander proved himself not a mere heir, but a leader who knew how to command awe. He marched with his army like a tempest, hunting down the rebellions that flared across Greece in the wake of his father's death. The cities that defied him believed the Macedonian throne had grown fragile, that the son could not inherit the strength of the father. But Alexander was determined to prove the opposite. He moved swiftly, struck mercilessly, and sent a message carved in steel and blood. The son has inherited not only his father's throne, but his power, and an ambition greater still. When the city of Thebes rose in defiance, Alexander did not falter.
Thebes, with its ancient legacy and proud place in the Greek world, thought itself capable of resisting the young king. His answer was fire and devastation. He led his army to its walls, stormed them with blood and flame, and razed the city to the ground. Nothing was spared save for the temple of the poet Pindar, an offering of reverence to art and song, and to art alone. All Greece stood in stunned silence. Thebes was no mere city, but a symbol, and its reduction to ashes was a proclamation carved into history. Any who dared to rebel would face a fate that could never be forgotten. From that moment, the legend of Alexander began to take shape. A youth in the bloom of life, searing his authority into the hearts of nations, inscribing the first lines of his path to glory in the blood of the defiant.
Alexander's ambition was never meant to be caged within the borders of a unified Greece. To him, true destiny lay beyond, his gaze fixed upon the grandest prize of all, the Persian Empire. It was the mightiest power the world had ever known, stretching from Asia Minor into the heart of the East, overflowing with gold, armies, palaces, and prestige. In 334 BC, Alexander crossed the Hellespont and set foot upon Persian soil for the very first time. His army was not vast compared to the legions of King Darius III, but it was a force honed to perfection, disciplined, unyielding, and marching behind a commander who believed that victory was born not of numbers, but of genius and courage. The first clash came at the river Granicus. The Persian host arrayed itself with confidence, certain that the Macedonian youth would falter before their countless ranks. Yet hesitation was foreign to Alexander. He led the charge himself, plunging into the torrent, driving into the enemy lines like a flaming arrow. Spears splintered around him, and death brushed close. Only the swift intervention of a loyal commander spared his life. Still, the day ended in triumph for the Macedonians. That victory was no mere battle won. It was the opening note of a legend that would echo across the world. 2 years later came the trial of trials, the Battle of Issus. This time, Alexander did not face a provincial garrison, but the great king himself. Darius had gathered an army that dwarfed the Macedonians, endless ranks of soldiers, chariots, even war elephants. The sight alone was enough to make seasoned generals tremble. But Alexander did not waver. With brilliance born of instinct and intellect, he exploited the flaws in Darius's formation. He hurled himself at the very heart of the Persian line, striking at the head so that the body would collapse. In that fateful moment, the Persian host broke. Darius fled the field in panic, abandoning his gilded tent and his own family to the conqueror. Alexander entered the royal pavilion, beholding treasures of gold, silt, and splendor beyond imagining. Yet he laid no hand in cruelty upon the king's wife or children. Instead, he treated them with honor, as guests under his protection. It was a message as powerful as any victory. Alexander was no mere plunderer, no barbarian driven by lust and greed. He bore himself as a king of kings, his conquest tempered with majesty, justice, and restraint. He sought not only to seize an empire, but to craft a vision of world dominion founded upon power, dignity, and respect. With Issus, Alexander was transformed. He was no longer simply the young monarch of Macedonia. He had risen as a challenger to the greatest throne on earth. After his thunderous victories over the Persians, Alexander's ambition would not rest at the borders of Asia Minor. He knew that the key to dominating the East lay to the south,
In Egypt, that ancient land which had never known submission, yet groaned under Persian rule. The Egyptians resented their overlords and awaited a liberator who would restore their dignity. In 332 BC, Alexander entered Egypt. Unlike his previous campaigns, there was no resistance, no armies to oppose him. On the contrary, the Egyptians welcomed him as a savior, not a conqueror. His entry was quiet yet monumental, for he saw in the eyes of the people a love and hope unseen even in the Greek cities. In that moment, he realized that Egypt would become a cornerstone of his global empire. He declared himself pharaoh, standing before the temples to perform the ancient rites of the Egyptian kings. He showed reverence to their gods, not disdain, proving that he was more than a foreign ruler. He was a sovereign who honored their beliefs and sacred traditions. This wisdom won him the hearts of the Egyptians. But Alexander was not content with rituals alone. He was a man always thinking of the future. On the Nile Delta, by the Mediterranean coast, he traced a plan in the sand with his staff for a city that would surpass all others. He named it Alexandria. Before his generals, he proclaimed, "Here will rise a city, a bridge between east and west, a city that shall never die." It was a declaration of a city that would become a beacon of knowledge and philosophy, home to great libraries and a hub of trade and culture for centuries to come. Yet the most mysterious and sacred episode in Egypt was his journey to the Siwa oasis deep in the desert. He traversed hundreds of kilometers across scorching sands to reach the temple of Amun, whom the Egyptians equated with Zeus, king of the gods. Alexander entered the innermost sanctuary alone, a place reserved for priests. No one knew what transpired inside, but when he emerged, his face shone, his features changed as if touched by a celestial encounter. Legends say the high priest declared, "You are the son of Amun." From that moment, Alexander no longer saw himself as a mere mortal or king, but as a divine scion chosen by the heavens to rule the world. For Alexander, Egypt was more than a conquered land. It was where his personal legend was forged. From the Siwa oasis and the birth of Alexandria, he emerged convinced that his destiny would stretch far beyond Persia, encompassing the entire world.
Alexander never forgot that his true adversary was not rebellious cities or local generals, but King Darius III himself, ruler of the Persian Empire. Their decisive encounter was inevitable, and it came in 331 BC on the vast plains of Gaugamela, where a new chapter in world history would be written. Darius, having learned from the defeats at Granicus and Issus, brought the full might of his empire. His army dwarfed Alexander's several times over, reinforced with war elephants and scythed chariots. Even the ground had been leveled to suit the march of his massive war machines. The sight was awe-inspiring. Endless ranks of soldiers, horses, and steel, a human sea meant to engulf the young Macedonian. Alexander's force, less than a third of the Persian numbers, held strength in discipline and unwavering faith in his strategic genius. He addressed his men.
"Today, we fight not only the Persians, but for the right to become masters of the world."
The battle began. Persian chariots raised clouds of dust, yet the Macedonians opened their ranks, letting the machines pass harmlessly, then struck from both flanks, setting them ablaze. At the crucial moment, Alexander led a daring charge straight into the heart of the Persian army, his eyes fixed on one goal: Darius.
The Persian king saw the dust approaching. Glimpsing the shadow of his past defeat, he faltered, turning his horse in flight and leaving behind a vast army without leadership. The morale of the Persians collapsed, their formations shattered before the relentless Macedonian strike. At Gaugamela, the Persian Empire fell. Alexander entered Babylon in triumph, welcomed like a king, streets adorned with garlands, priests and citizens alike paying homage. From there, he seized Susa, rich with treasure, and then Persepolis, the crown jewel of Persia's palaces. He ascended the golden throne of Darius and proclaimed, "Now I am master of Asia." Yet victory's joy was short-lived. During a night of celebration, amidst feasts and wine, tongues of fire engulfed the magnificent city. Some say Alexander himself ordered the burning, avenging Athens' destruction by the Persians 2 centuries earlier. Others claim intoxication and revelry led to the disaster. Whatever the cause, Persepolis, emblem of Persian grandeur, turned to ash, carried away by the wind. It was a declaration, the end of a great civilization and the dawn of a new era, led by the young king who now reigned supreme over Asia.
Though Alexander's life was surrounded by iron and blood, as a commander who knew neither rest nor peace, his heart was not devoid of feeling. During one of his campaigns through the rugged mountains of Central Asia, while confronting stubborn local tribes, he met a girl who captured his soul long before he saw any political advantage in marriage. Her name was Roxana, daughter of a powerful Bactrian chieftain. Historians describe her as possessing a unique Asian beauty with delicate features and a bold spirit. When Alexander first saw her at a banquet after one of his victories, he felt an unfamiliar stirring in his heart. He did not see her as spoils of war, but as a woman his heart truly cherished. Despite the objections of some of his generals, who preferred a pure Greek marriage suitable for their king, he insisted on marrying her, defying customs and tradition. Their union was both political and passionate, an alliance with her tribe, and an honest acknowledgement of his deep attraction to her. Yet behind the glow of love, the shadow of war remained heavy. His armies, which had accompanied him from Macedonia, were no longer what they once were. Years of relentless battles had exhausted his men, and the wounds of the heart ran deeper than the wounds of the sword. Many longed for their homes, their families, whom they had not seen in years, the orchards and villages they had left behind. Alexander saw this in their eyes. They still obeyed his commands faithfully, yet fatigue gnawed at their spirits. Some secretly wondered, how long will this endless march continue? Does our king's ambition have limits, or will the whole world fail to satisfy his thirst for conquest? Thus, while Alexander's heart basked in the warmth of Roxana's love, his army bled silently, caught between homesickness and the relentless tide of bloodshed. Alexander did not confine himself to Asia Minor or Persia. Within him burned an unquenchable thirst. He marched his army across mountains and rivers until he reached India, where he faced a formidable king named Porus. At the Battle of the Hydaspes River, Alexander encountered something he had never seen before: war elephants. Colossal as moving walls, they terrified horses and trampled soldiers beneath their massive feet. Yet Alexander's genius did not fail him. He skillfully divided his forces and used the monsoon rains to his advantage, ultimately defeating Porus. When the defeated king was brought before him, Alexander asked, "How do you wish to be treated?" Porus answered, "Treat me as a king." Alexander admired his courage, leaving him on his throne and granting him new lands. But at this point,
his soldiers rebelled. They had grown weary of constant war. Thousands of miles from home, exhausted from bloodshed and relentless campaigns, they refused to march further eastward, beyond India. Alexander had no choice but to turn back.
Alexander the Great returned to Babylon, the city he intended as the heart of his global empire, a capital that would unite East and West, Greece and Persia, and serve as the springboard for new campaigns. His dreams knew no bounds. He planned a campaign into the Arabian Peninsula and spoke of conquering the West, perhaps reaching the farthest corners of Europe. It seemed as though he wished never to stop, as if time itself had become a sword in his hand. But suddenly, in June 323 BC, he was struck by a mysterious fever. At first, he ignored it, thinking it a passing ailment. He who had defied swords and arrows, how could a fever defeat him? Yet the sickness grew stronger day by day, and his mighty body weakened at an astonishing pace. He could no longer rise, his words faltered, and eventually his voice vanished entirely. Anxiety spread among his soldiers. It is said that thousands of Macedonian warriors lined up to bid him farewell in his final days. They entered his chamber one by one, passing before his bed, while Alexander lifted his head with difficulty, greeting them with silent, faint smiles, as if bidding farewell to sons rather than soldiers. The scene drew tears from the hardest hearts. On a sorrowful night, his heart ceased to beat. Alexander passed away at the age of 32, leaving behind a vast empire, a lost army, and a world astonished by the death of a young man believed to be a son of the gods. The cause of his death remained a mystery that puzzled historians through the ages. Some claimed he was poisoned by hidden enemies. Others said he succumbed to malaria or typhoid that spread through Babylon. Some believed his exhaustion, old wounds, and indulgence in wine hastened his end. What is certain is that his sudden death ended a dream unfinished. Alexander, who wished to unite the world under a single banner, left it fractured to be divided among his generals like wolves over prey. Yet his name endured, not just as a king, but as a living legend, gone before his story could be fully told.
After his sudden departure, his generals divided his vast empire as spoils. Territories were split among Antigonus, Seleucus, Ptolemy, and other commanders who became minor kings in the shadow of their great sovereign. Yet none could inherit his stature or replicate his achievements. Alexander left not only a throne, but a legend too vast for any man to carry. In less than 13 years of rule, he transformed the face of the world. He founded cities bearing his name from the banks of the Nile to the heart of Asia, most notably Alexandria, which became a beacon of learning and philosophy. East and West merged under his influence. Greek philosophy intertwined with ancient Eastern civilizations, and Hellenistic culture was born, laying the foundation of human thought for centuries. Alexander lived like a storm, brief in years yet immense in impact. He was not merely a conqueror, but a symbol of boundless human ambition and a dream that transcended the limits of kingdoms. More than 2 millennia later, his name is still recounted in books, poems, and legends, as if he were a hero emerging from an endless epic. Alexander did not die in Babylon. He remains alive in humanity's memory, immortal as he wished, son of the gods to his people, son of eternity to history.
This is Alexander, the conqueror who wished to rule the world and instead conquered hearts and history.